There's a question that has quietly haunted Hollywood for over 4 decades, and it has nothing to do with scandal, box office failure, or a career gone sideways. It's stranger than any of that. It's the question of how two of the most pursued, most desired, most celebrated people in American entertainment history found each other, held on to each other, and kept choosing each other every single morning for more than 40 years without ever signing a marriage certificate. Goldie Hawn, the woman the entire world wanted. The woman who could walk into any room and make everyone in it feel like the temperature just rose 10 degrees, ended up with one man. One. And she stayed. And here's the thing. The full story of how that happened, the real version with all the wreckage and heartbreak and unexpected grace included, is nothing like the version people think they know. By the time this story is finished, something will land differently about what love actually requires in an environment specifically engineered to destroy it. Goldie Hawn is 79 years old now, and she's been opening up about Kurt Russell in ways she never quite did before, talking about why he was different, why he was the only one who ever made her feel genuinely seen, and why the answer surprised even her closest friends. None of it is what people expected. None of it ever was. Growing up in Tacoma Park, Maryland, in a warm Jewish household where music ran through everything, Goldie didn't need anyone to point her toward performing. Her father, Edward, played music, and her mother, Laura, ran a dance school and a jewelry shop, which meant art and commerce were woven into the fabric of daily life before Goldie was old enough to understand either one. A brother, named Edward Jr., had passed away in infancy before she could form memories of him, and that quiet grief shaped the air in the home, even when nobody spoke about it directly. Goldie started dancing at 3 years old, not because anyone told her to, but because her body seemed to demand it. What happened next, by the time she was 10 years old, still catches people off guard when they hear it for the first time. She wasn't taking beginner classes or performing in school recitals. She was on stage with the Ballet Russe de Monte Carlo, performing in the Nutcracker alongside professional dancers who had trained their entire lives for exactly that stage. That level of talent at that age doesn't come from instruction alone. By her teenage years, she was playing Juliet in local theater productions and simultaneously running her own ballet school. And when college started to feel like a cage compared to everything else available to her, she walked away from it and never looked back. Her professional debut came at the 1964 New York World's Fair in a production of Can-Can, and from there she worked the go-go club circuit through New York and New Jersey, developing something that no choreographer can teach, a natural, unguarded energy that made strangers feel like they already knew her. That quality, that specific warmth, would become the engine of everything that followed. Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In arrived in 1968, and Goldie arrived with it, and the combination was immediate. She played the bubbly, giggling blonde who forgot her lines and laughed at her own jokes, and the country fell for her the way people fall for someone at a party who clearly isn't trying to impress anyone. There was nothing calculated about it. What came through the screen was a person who was genuinely present, genuinely warm, genuinely undefended, and in a television landscape full of polish and performance, that quality was almost shocking. America responded accordingly. Cactus Flower changed her trajectory permanently in 1969, earning her an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress and a Golden Globe at 23 years old, and what followed was one of the most sustained runs of commercial success any actress has ever put together. There's a Girl in My Soup, Butterflies Are Free, The Sugarland Express, Shampoo, Foul Play, Seems Like Old Times, and then Private Benjamin, which pulled an Oscar nomination for Best Actress. She wasn't just working at the top of the industry. She was, for a stretch of years in the 1970s and early 1980s, essentially running it on her own terms, with her own production company and that signature smile that made film critics reach for words they didn't usually use. But none of that success, not one frame of it, told the full story of what her private life looked like during those same years. Before fame arrived in any serious way, Goldie had loved. Gus Trichonis was a dancer and actor who had appeared in West Side Story, and they crossed paths in the late 1960s while performing together. By her own account, she wanted to marry him almost immediately after they met, and they did in Hawaii in May of 1969, the same spring her Oscar arrived, and her career exploded into a completely different category. For a moment, everything seemed to be working at once. The problem was that careers moving at that velocity have a way of reshaping everything around them, and the asymmetry that developed, Goldie's world expanding in every direction while Gus struggled to find steady work, created a drift that never reversed. Separation came in 1973. The divorce wasn't filed until New Year's Eve 1975, and by that point she was already engaged to someone new. Bill Hudson was a musician and actor known from the Hudson Brothers. He and their connection started on a first-class flight from New York to Los Angeles, the kind of meeting that feels like it was written for a film because the setting does most of the work. They married on July 3, 1976, just weeks after her divorce from Gus finalized, and together they had 2 children, Oliver and Kate, both of whom grew into successful actors themselves. The marriage collapsed within 4 years. Bill filed for divorce in 1980, and what came afterward was painful in ways that stretched well beyond the legal process. Bill spoke publicly about his experience, and he chose direct language. Doubts had crept in on their wedding day itself, he said, recalling a moment when Goldie leaned close and asked whether they'd done the right thing. His account described a man who wanted a traditional family structure, who felt fully committed, and who believed Goldie wanted something fundamentally different, something with more freedom and fewer fixed walls. The accusations went further than incompatibility. He described manipulation and cruelty behind the public image, disagreed strongly with her characterization of their arrangement as open, and said the loss he felt most acutely was being pushed out of his children's lives after the split. That pain, by his account, never fully left him. Gus Trichonis, speaking separately, described similar themes: a woman who transformed as celebrity grew, who began moving in circles that felt foreign to him, who had started spending time with figures like Barbra Streisand and Jack Nicholson in ways that seemed to signal a new identity pulling away from the one they'd shared. 2 marriages ended. 2 men carried bitterness for years afterward, and Goldie kept showing up to set, kept lighting up the screen, kept building a career that was the envy of an entire industry, all while navigating private heartbreak that the public never witnessed. She hadn't yet found the person who could hold space for the full version of who she was, the woman who needed both freedom and family, both independence and deep belonging, without asking her to choose between them. That changed in 1983, though the origin of the story technically goes back further. The first time Kurt Russell and Goldie Hawn were in the same room was 1966, on the set of the one and only, genuine original family band. She was 21, he was 16. She later admitted she found him adorable, but nothing happened. The age gap was obvious. Both of them were focused on work, and she had a standing policy against dating fellow actors. That first meeting filed itself away as a minor, pleasant memory and seemed to go nowhere. 17 years passed, and then the memory came back to life in the most unexpected way. Kurt walked into his audition for Swing Shift in 1983, visibly rough from the night before, nervous and not entirely together, And when Goldie entered the room, he said something that should have ended everything before it started. He told her directly that she had a great figure, blunt, unfiltered, the kind of comment that lands as either charming or catastrophic, depending entirely on the delivery. She smiled and thanked him, and just like that, the tension in the room dissolved. An audition became something else. Their first date moved through several locations in a way that felt almost deliberately cinematic. They danced at the Playboy Club first, then made their way to a house Goldie had recently purchased. She didn't have keys yet, so they broke in together and wandered through empty rooms in a house that hadn't been lived in yet. No furniture, no settled life, just space and the particular silence of something about to begin. The police showed up before anything could develop further, and they ended the night at a hotel instead. Kurt later described the whole evening simply as a lot of fun, which may be the most understated summary of a consequential first date in Hollywood history. Once filming began on swing shift, the feelings that had started in that audition room grew into something neither of them was inclined to step back from. What captured Goldie wasn't his looks, though she'd acknowledged those from their first meeting in 1966. What got her was the honesty. He didn't perform for her. He didn't calibrate himself based on who she was or what her name meant, or what winning her over might do for him. He was simply himself, without adjustment, without theater, and in a world where almost everyone around her was playing a version of a character at all times, that directness felt like oxygen. And then she watched him with her children. She brought Oliver and Kate to set, and what she saw there, the ease with which Kurt connected with them, the naturalness of it, the absence of effort or calculation, settled something in her that romantic attraction alone never could have. She described it later as feeling something new growing inside her when she watched him with her kids. Not just love, the recognition of a family. By 1986, 3 years into their relationship, Goldie and Kurt welcomed their son Wyatt, completing a blended family that included Oliver, Kate, and Kurt's son Boston from his previous marriage. 4 children, 2 careers, 1 household, and no wedding. And that last detail was entirely deliberate. The questions never stopped coming. Friends asked, reporters asked, the public wrote letters asking. Kurt addressed it head-on in a 2023 interview, noting that he and Goldie had never understood why anyone else cared as much as they seemed to. Even their children didn't push for it. Goldie's explanation, offered in an interview with CNN, went to the heart of why. She'd watched too many divorces cause too much damage to too many children, including the children in her own story, and she loved the idea of waking up each morning and making an active choice. Choosing Kurt, choosing their life. Not because a legal document required continuity, but because she genuinely wanted to be there. Daily choice, she argued, meant more than any ceremony. Their chemistry refused to stay private. Overboard arrived in 1987 with Goldie as a spoiled amnesiac, and Kurt as the man who convinces her they're married. And audiences loved it, in part because what they were watching didn't feel entirely like fiction. The irony of the premise wasn't lost on anyone, least of all the 2 people making it. Years later, in 2020, the film appeared on television while they were at home together, and Goldie smiled, remembering how they'd started, watching their younger selves on screen from inside the life that had grown from that beginning. At the 1989 Academy Awards, they walked out together to present, and the exchange that followed became one of those moments people remember decades later. Goldie told the crowd they were co-stars, comrades, companions, and a couple. Kurt noted, with a straight face, that they were not married. She turned to him and asked whether that was a proposal. He told her they'd discuss it later that night. She told him they certainly would. The audience erupted, and the whole thing lasted maybe 30 seconds, but somehow said everything about who they were together. Kate Hudson's son Ryder, Russell Robinson, arrived on January 8, 2004, and just like that, Goldie and Kurt became grandparents. Kate had been clear about wanting children young enough that her parents could know her kids while everyone still had energy for it. More grandchildren followed over the years: Bingham, Ronnie, Bodie, Wilder, Rio, and Buddy, 7 in total, each one photographed and celebrated and clearly adored. The family they had assembled, blended and unconventional and complicated in all the ways real families are, was visibly, stubbornly happy. The harder chapters came too. In late 2023, Goldie revealed that their Los Angeles home had been broken into twice. The first time happened while they were out at dinner, and she came home to find her closet ransacked and her safe forced open by people who clearly knew what they were doing. 4 months later, someone attempted a second break-in while she was home alone. She heard a noise upstairs and didn't understand until the next morning what had happened. The incidents shook her enough that she and Kurt brought in personal security, and eventually they made the decision to leave Malibu entirely, relocating to Palm Desert in search of something quieter. None of it touched the foundation, because the foundation was never the house. What they had built together over 40 years was not a location or a lifestyle. It was a specific, daily practice of choosing each other, and disruption from outside had never been the thing that threatened it. In April 2024, on Conan O'Brien's podcast, Goldie gave the clearest answer she'd ever offered to the question of what made Kurt different from everyone who came before. It wasn't charm or looks or even honesty, though all of those mattered. The thing that bonded them immediately and sustained them through everything was that he matched her devotion to family, that being number one to each other was a value they both held without needing to negotiate it. She also said something unusually direct about monogamy, acknowledging that it's genuinely hard, especially in an industry like theirs, and that she and Kurt dealt with that reality by talking openly about it, agreeing that attraction to other people is a normal human experience, and believing that what you choose to do with those feelings is what defines the relationship. Their bond, she said, has elasticity. It bends, but it doesn't break. In May 2017, both Goldie and Kurt received stars on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Standing beside their twin stars, Kurt looked at her and told the crowd that to her, he owed his wonderful life. He told her he cherished her. He said no star on any boulevard could compare to what they'd built, and that there was nobody else he'd rather stand beside for any of it. They kissed, and the crowd went quiet in the way crowds do when something happening in front of them is clearly real. By March 2025, 41 years in, they walked the Oscars red carpet together. Goldie in a yellow Dolce & Gabbana gown, and Kurt in a classic black tuxedo, holding hands and smiling in the way people smile when happiness isn't being performed for an audience, but simply exists and happens to be visible. When asked how it felt, Kurt answered without dressing it up. He said he loved the fact that they had found each other, and that they were still it, still showing up, still glad the other person was in the room. None of what Goldie and Kurt built looks like what love is supposed to look like according to any conventional script. No wedding. No legal record of commitment. Just two people who kept deciding, morning after morning, year after year, that what they had together was worth more than any alternative. A woman who had been through enough loss to have given up on the whole idea, and a man who walked into an audition looking like he hadn't slept and said the wrong thing and, somehow, against every reasonable expectation, got it exactly right. That's the story. That's all of it. And 41 years later, it's still going.